Hey, this is Sky. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You know, we have to start listening to our inner voices. We have to start taking our own advice. Have you ever found that you're able to give better advice to other people than you are to yourself? Well, you can give that same advice to yourself, but you have to listen to it. That's the thing we don't do. Other people may listen to us and they may respect us in a way that we don't respect ourselves. You have to start respecting yourself. You have to start trusting and having faith in that inner voice that can guide you. You know, people look so much for external sources of leadership. Like we're sheep looking for the sheep herder. You don't need that. You can guide yourself. But it takes the right mindset and it takes a little bit of clarity in it. Sometimes it takes going through emotional breakdowns. Sometimes it takes going through a hard time in your life, going through some struggle, being at the bottom, reaching your breaking point to finally get desperate enough to get rid of all the other bullshit, all the ego, and to listen to that inner voice. I'll tell you a little story about how this worked for me. I was living in Santa Cruz, California in the early 90s. It was kind of a surf ghetto. Downtown by the boardwalk, they had a barrio, Mexican barrio, that was pretty dangerous. They had street gangs there, which were large. The Sureños were one of them, by far the largest. And then they had Brown Pride and an old gang just called the Santa Cruz Locos, all Mexican. Me and my brother, only white boys living in the neighborhood. They didn't take kindly to us at first. There's a lot of racism out in California, a lot of segregation out in California, and as far as race goes, skin color goes, you're kind of supposed to stick with your own. Now, it may have changed. It's a lot more progressive place than it used to be. But this is the way it was back in the old days. And here we are, these two white boys living in the barrio, like fish out of water. Every time we step out of the house, people are just like, "What the fuck you doing around here?" We'd get that question that they ask you of where, you know, who are you, where are you from, what do you need, what are you doing around here? Every single time we stepped out, and I have to show people I live right there. When I first moved in there, I went right down to the corner where the hot spot was, where all the street gang guys, not the mob guys, the Mexican Mafia, because they have that too, but the street gangs. And they're hanging there selling their dope. Graffiti everywhere, you know, bandanas and shirts all done up. Fedora hats, big pleated pants that are oversized, you know, the whole style. That Vato Cholo kind of thing. And I went right up to the whole group of them, there's like 20 of them. And I said, rather aggressively, "I'm Sky, I live in that building right down there. I ain't no punk, I ain't no faggot, and I ain't no snitch." And they're all looking at me like, "What?" I pulled out a joint. They thought I was pulling out a gun. I pulled out a joint from my waistband because I was wearing sweatpants. Big fat one. Lit it up, took a couple puffs, passed it to one of the guys. He took it, and I was just like, you know, if anybody needs anything from me, or if you see me around, you know where I'm at. And they were all like, "Oh, they're stunned." They started laughing. And that was kind of my introduction to the neighborhood. I used to walk down to the store every day to go get my beer, my alcohol, and I was a major alcoholic. I was always getting another case, doing that a couple times a day sometimes. I ended up just kind of by luck meeting one of these La M Mexican Mafia members. Now, these aren't street gang guys. There's a difference. The street gang guys are younger, and they're street gangs, just like you've seen on TV in the movie Colors or whatever. You've seen a bunch of movies. La M is a different scene. Go look at the movie American Me, Edward James Olmos. You know, they talk about that in there. They're more sophisticated. And I met one of the main guys that was for that neighborhood. And his name was Pedro. And he was much older than me. He was in his 40s, I was in my mid-20s. And we started talking. And we would just make friends. And he would walk with me through the neighborhood. I would usually see him in the vicinity of the liquor store, only because there was a row of very nice apartments. The rest of the neighborhood sucked. But there was new apartment buildings that were really nice. And he lived in one of those. And every once in a while, I would see him out front of his apartment, sweeping up or whatever. And we would always talk. So knowing Pedro really got me in with the rest of the neighborhood, and especially with La M. That was my foot in the door. That was the ticket I needed. And I was actively looking for connections. I was a criminal, and I had a reputation on both coasts, East Coast and West Coast, within my particular niche. It was all about robbery. Well, one day I saw Pedro up on the path, the bike path, on the edge of the neighborhood. They had just built it. Nobody really went up there. I went up there because it was really the only green area that you could find to let my dogs go and pee and poo. And it was just a good way to just kind of get some, relaxation time away from the drama of the neighborhood. And there was murders and all kinds of stuff going on. Drama all the time. Drama every day. So I'm walking the dog up on the path and I see this shadowy figure down, lurking around in the middle of the path. Maybe 300 yards, a football field away, just far enough to see the shadow, but I couldn't really tell who it was. And hey, it's a bad neighborhood, the worst neighborhood in town. You just got to be careful. So I'm walking up kind of hard. Finally, I get a little bit closer and I realize who it was. This is my buddy Pedro. And he's walking around up there, just kind of pacing around like he didn't know what to do. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's obviously involved in some sort of drama. He looks very emotional, just kind of running through scenarios in my head, wondering what's up with this guy. So I say to him, because I could see on his face, looked like he was about to cry or just got done crying. Looked like he was very uncomfortable with me being there because you know how you catch a guy at an emotional time that they have to kind of straighten up because he's got an image, he's got an ego. He didn't want me to see him like that. He didn't want me to see him in a state of weakness. And I said, hey man, what's going on? What's wrong with you? So the floodgates open and he starts telling me about all the politics of the mob and the politics between the street soldiers and the mob and the new guys that are joining the mob and how they're not obeying the tradition and how he's sick of it all. He's been to prison so many times, he thinks he might be going again, and he's just sick of it all, he's sick of it all. He wants out. And that's what he said, and I was shocked because this guy seemed like he was so wrapped in it. He would get so much respect from the neighborhood. When he would walk up and down the street with me, people would come out of the woodworks to shake his hand. Just dying to shake his hand, like almost lining up to shake his hand one after another. They shake my hand too just for walking next to him. And he's telling me how he doesn't like it. He doesn't feel like he's getting the same respect that he used to, and he's just sick of this life. He's sick of it. Now, I didn't really understand what he was talking about as far as being sick of the life because I was just actively trying to get involved. I was like a snowball going down a hill. I was doing it on both coasts, everywhere. I was so immersed in this mindset of I'll do whatever I want. Nobody can stop me. And it was all coming out as criminal behavior. But I recognized my friend was in pain and I told him, hey, you don't want to be down here? You don't want to be involved with those kind of people? Then leave. And that just felt like the most obvious advice to me. You don't want to be a gangster no more? Don't be a gangster no more. Go move. And he was like, well, I don't know where I would move to. Pick anywhere. Go somewhere where these guys don't exist. They're not everywhere. You could easily find a town where there's no Mexicans. That's not hard. You might have to leave California. But there's 49 other states that you can go to. You got money. You can go anywhere. He looks up at the mountains. The mountains aren't really that far. And he was like, I've been down here my whole life. I've never once been up in those mountains. I was just like, then go to the mountains. To me, it just sounded so simple. He thanked me profusely. I didn't really even get it. And he was like, I think maybe I will. Maybe I will go to the mountains. That was the last time I had seen Pedro for years. About 5 years went by. I hadn't seen him, and I wondered what ever happened to Pedro. And I thought maybe he did leave, but he went to prison because he was mentioning how he's having legal problems. You never know with these guys. They could be on the street one night, the next night they're doing 50, 60 years up in a federal pen or up in Pelican Bay or wherever. You just never know with guys like this. So I didn't really hold much weight onto it. Well, about 5 years go by. And I was so immersed, submersed, surrounded in criminal behavior by criminals, and I was just getting worse and worse, pulling major jobs, stuff that was very risky, stuff I shouldn't have been involved in. And I had my moment of clarity. And all I had to do was take my own advice, and I was up on the path, walking my dog alone, and I saw a guy on the path again. But his body posture looked relaxed. He had a little bit longer hair. I finally get up to him, and the guy had a mustache and a little goatee, and I saw his eyes and his cheekbones, and I recognized him. That's Pedro. He looked totally different. Let his hair grow out, and he was like relaxed. He was dressed like a yuppie, had one of these short sleeve button-up shirts and just some regular pants, and didn't look like a gangster, just looked like a regular dude. And he was happy. You see by his posture and everything, he was a different person. And this was years later, and I said, man, what are you doing here? The last time I saw you was on this path. And he's like, I know, homie, I've been waiting for you. He's like, I just wanted to come back and thank you. He's like, we're moving. I've been up in the mountains this whole time. I bought myself a house up there. He's like, but we're moving out of state. We're going to move to Arizona. I got a giant house in Arizona, and I changed my life. He's going back to school, and he's telling me all these different things he's doing with his life. And he was about to cry. I could see it. He gave me this big hug and just clutched on to me. And I could feel his heartbeat. This guy was so thankful. And before he started crying, he shook my hand again like 3 more times, and then was like, I gotta go. I just wanted to say thank you, man. And he took off. And that was the last time I ever saw Pedro. He changed his life, just off of some advice I gave him. And I walked my dog back down to the apartment. And it was the same old shit. Gangs and drugs, cops, enemies. And I thought to myself, this is it for me. This is my life. This is the best that this guy can do. And I felt stuck, and then I realized, wait a minute. I just told Pedro to leave. Why don't I leave? And I did. I left the barrio, and off of that day, I never committed another crime in my life. Now, it took me a while to go sober. It took me a while to finally stop surrounding myself with gangsters. It took me a while to finally take the last step out of that world, but I never committed another job. I never did another crime. I never crossed that line again. I went straight, as they call it. I never did another crime after that day. I was done. And I want to say it was all because of Pedro and thank him. Go hug him, but it wasn't. It was my own advice. I took my own advice. So I don't know if this story resonates with you, if it means anything to you, but it's always stood out for me as one of these times, an example that we can be our own heroes. We can be our own guides. We can parent ourselves. You have to start listening to what you say. And the trick to it is to act on it. So pay attention to those little voices inside of you. Start following your own advice. Thanks for watching.